Welcome back to Game Geeks. I'm your host, Kurt Weigel. Today's episode, Don't Rest Your Head. Folks, this is a pretty thin book, but don't let that fool you. This, pound for pound, is probably one of the creepiest games out there. This is nasty. And I don't mean that in terms of the quality of the game. It's a really well done game. It's definitely not for beginners, though, because it involves you tossing around different types of die for different things. There's madness die, there's exhaustion dice, there's a hope bucket to put, the hope bowl to put coins in, there's a despair bowl to put coins in, the GM has pain dice. It can get a little cumbersome. There's a very nice summary chart in here, sort of breaking down the rules for you. And honestly, if you're going to get into this game, I recommend it. I'm not going to talk about the engine that much after this because the setting itself is very much worth the analysis. The closest analogy I can tell you to this is Lewis Carroll got a hold of some really bad shrimp one night and had a nasty dream that involved the movie Dark City. And somehow they all got blended together. This feels a lot to me like going through the mirror down the rabbit hole into a very twisted world. Dark City is probably the closest analogy, and I hate making analogies like that because I think it pigeonholes games, and I certainly don't want to do that with this because it's very much worth your effort to look into. Even if you didn't like Dark City, which if you didn't, watch it again because it's a really good movie, but that's for another show. This game supposes that you can't sleep for one reason or another. You're over-caffeinated, you're overstressed, you have a crappy bed, your lover snores, whatever, but you have not been able to sleep for a very long time. In doing so, in not sleeping, you have broken through the walls of reality. And you see that reality is not what it's set up to be for us. You go through your city into the mad city, which is where things are not right. This is where, you have certain powers that come with this. It almost masquerades as sort of an urban fantasy, but don't let it fool you. Your powers are not that impressive compared to the people around you. You're chased by a crazy cop who has a clock for a head. And it sounds funny, and you're probably out there laughing and thinking it's funny. It's really not, especially when you're chased by people who, like dogs whose head are needles, and when they catch you can stitch your shadow to the floor to where you can't move, and where you lose things. If you're lucky, you lose your life. Instead, you might lose your memory of who you are, or you might lose the memory of your daughter, or your willingness to go on and fight, and you become just another drone walking around this city. You're sort of an outlaw. If you're saying to yourself, it sounds a little bit like the Matrix without the computer, it's sort of the same plot that you run into in things like The Matrix, in Dark City, and a lot of those reality isn't what it seems to be. Philip K. Dick probably had a lot of back influence on this ultimately leading up to it because he was sort of the master of reality isn't what you make it out to be. If you want a dark horror game, where it's not horror like splatter or, you have to worry about seeing your brains blown against the wall. If you want something bordering on surreal, if you want something that's our world but just crazy enough that you're being chased by clockwork cops, but it's really creepy when it's done right, this is definitely a game for you. I recommend getting your hands on this. The madness in it is such that it's not as simplified as the Call of Cthulhu insanity mechanic. I personally like that. Whenever you make something more detailed, you also up the complexity a little bit. The madness in this, though, is easy to handle. The artwork in this book is very evocative. It's almost all photoshopped images of real world that just make it all the darker. You can get this from Indie Press Revolutions. It's hard to realize sometimes that Evil Hat Productions, the same people that bring you Spirit of the Century, that lighthearted, fun pulp game, also bring you something like this. The worst thing you can do in this game is go to sleep because then they find you and then you're done. You're either so ravaged that you can't do anything else or you're dead. I recommend this highly if you want something really dark and twisted. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or things you'd like to see us review, please feel free to contact us at knweigel@yahoo.com. For Game Geeks, I'm your host, Kurt Weigel. Good day and good gaming.